Who invited you to Forbidden Door? Was there an invite situation? Did you?
Nobody. I showed up without uninvited, and people were chanting T-Bar when I was wrestling in Madison Square Garden. So to chant "We Want Dijak" is not out of the realm of possibility.
Did it make it heartbreaking for you?
Yes.
Do you at all feel betrayed by Triple H?
I never got an explanation, which, for the record, that's not cool. I'm going to prove him wrong about this one. They're like, I'm sorry, but Vince wants you to have a seizure. No, Vince, that's stupid. No, I wanted to have a seizure.
Did Vince act out this seizure for you guys?
Is there a dramatic difference between those two Vinces? And he was like, yes, huge difference. I don't want to assume it's like a dementia thing, but that's kind of the parallel that everybody drew. It would generate millions of views on YouTube for all the wrong reasons. We're so clearly not independent contractors. Like, that's the most made up nonsense in the history of the world. Oh, that's great. We love him. He's our favorite employee. By the way, I'm booking the fake show, and he gets killed in 5 seconds, and we dump dog food all over him.
Who invited you to Forbidden Door? Was there an invite situation? Did you?
Nobody. I showed up without uninvited. No, I don't. So Mojo and Steve both arranged that for me. They have great connections. Steve was there with me, so he brought me along, brought me in. I don't know if anything needs to be approved by Tony specifically, or if they just kind of have people going in and out. But I know that Tony has been made aware of my interest, and I know that there's reciprocal respect, if nothing else. So yeah, I don't think that there was any issue with me being back there. I would certainly hope not, considering I'm friends with and wrestled about 90% of the roster on AEW at this point. I mean, that's kind of just what happens when you've been around the business as long as I have.
And you are a veteran of the wrestling world, so to speak, the independent circuit and whatnot. I did want to dive into that because I've heard you talk about how much experience you have in the wrestling business and how you're going to navigate your next move moving forward. And I know a lot of people are going to assume, yeah, you just go to the next big company. But if you look at the business end of it, I've noticed that there's a tipping point now where both companies have loaded rosters, a lot of people there. And so it's probably harder to find a spot now more than ever. How much are you leaning toward going to the independent circuit, and then whether it's reinventing yourself, whether it's becoming a bigger star on the indies? I see Ricochet in this similar bubble where there might be more value in you increasing your value on the independent circuit before you make your next move, whether it is going to an AEW or another company.
Yeah, so I'm investigating that and exploring it, in real time. I mean, everyone. Not everyone, but a lot of people saw, the letter that I released, and that was all factually accurate. And I didn't find out very, very long before that all of this was going down. So in a sense, it's on me. I should have been planning better, but the reality is I wasn't really planning for this. I was planning on re-signing a new contract and negotiating a new contract. So once this kind of got dumped on me, it became kind of a fire sale. I needed to figure out what to do real quickly because my last paycheck was coming up soon. Because that date's already come and gone. So right now I've dove head first. My wife is helping me tremendously fill out my calendar. Like I said, the letter I had my booking email on it, and my phone just about exploded the second that I pushed that off. So I've been trying to fill dates and piece together everything. I'm starting with the guys that I'm familiar with. I've already shown up at Blitzkrieg Pro, which was an indie that treated me well back in the day. Just got announced for Beyond, Limitless, Rev.
You're going to be wrestling Michael Oku pretty soon, right?
Yeah, in Rev Pro. Yeah. So these are all guys that I know. These are all guys that I'm familiar with, the promoters. So they gave me, my breaks when I was in Ring of Honor, before I was in Ring of Honor, and certainly before WWE. So they all get first crack in the return tour. So I'm trying to pay it off as best I can and hit up all those places as much as I can. I just got announced as a new trainer at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, which is where I first started in 2012. So I'm super excited about that. There's a ton of opportunities coming my way. Free agency is off and running. It's going very, very well. So just to answer your question in a roundabout way, I'm interested in going wherever I can have the best chances and opportunities possible. So I'm not gonna write off a company and say no, it's not time for AEW for me. I'm not gonna write off a company and say no, I don't fit in with TNA right now. I would hear what we're exploring those opportunities. We're going to see what the return options are, and then I'd like to have a conversation with those people and say, what is our plan look like? What does our outlook look like? Is there an opportunity for upward mobility? And I know that's not a term you hear a lot in professional wrestling. You hear it more in the business world, but for me, that's important, right? Because I've never had an expectation of, I don't expect someone to give me everything all at once. Right. Sometimes that happens in professional wrestling, right? Sometimes a guy shows up and you say, that's our king, let's crown him. And you just, you give him everything. If somebody wanted to give me that, that's great. I'll take that, and I'll be the top guy in your company, and I'll be the best professional wrestler you've ever seen in your life. I'm very confident in that. That being said, if someone wants to just give me a spot because they think that's what I deserve and that's what I've earned, that's fine. I will take that spot as long as I can have assurance that when I over deliver and when I have the best matches on your card and when I deliver the best, most memorable promos and vignettes on your card, that there is an opportunity to advance, right? Because that's what I did in NXT, and I didn't receive that feedback. I received, I received, here's where you're going to be. Here's where you're going to be. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. By the way, we're not going to renew your contract. That doesn't sit well with me, right? Because I felt like I had overachieved and that wasn't recognized, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And I think your letter captured a certain tone, and I think it resonated with a lot of people. That's why you recently tweeted, the streets were chanting, "We want Dijak" at Madison Square Garden. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, people were not happy about that. Apparently, some of the chants were. I wasn't there, obviously. I don't know. I heard through two separate sources that there were "We want Dijak" chants in Madison Square Garden, which didn't surprise me because I've wrestled in Madison Square Garden a number of times, and people were chanting T-Bar when I was wrestling in Madison Square Garden. So to chant "We want Dijak" is not out of the realm of possibility. But apparently there was a mixed return on that tweet about what the people were chanting. I have no doubt that some people were probably chanting "We want Dijak" and some people were probably chanting something else. I don't really know. I don't really care. I try not to pay attention too much to the feedback on Twitter because it's usually nonsense. But that being said, I put out a lot of nonsense on Twitter too. So
well, you are the king of the ratio. I don't consider that nonsense at all. But you're right about everything else on Twitter.
That is the pinnacle of nonsense. Actually, that is the most nonsensical thing I do in my life is ratioing people. But people seem to either laugh or hate my guts, and whichever, at least you're thinking about me. But yeah, to the people who may have been chanting "We want Dijak" at Madison Square Garden, that's very meaningful to me. To the guy at Monday Night Raw right now who has a sign that says "Thank you, Dijak," right behind Hardcam. Thank you to him. I appreciate everyone who shouts me out. I appreciate everyone who keeps me in their mind, in their messages. Monday Night Raw is at the TD Garden right now. That's a place where I grew up watching basketball. I grew up watching Monday Night Raw. And I've been on Monday Night Raw in the TD Garden. It's always going to be a meaningful place to me. And hopefully one day I get to be on AEW in the TD Garden. Hopefully one day I get to be on New Japan in the TD Garden. Hopefully I get to wrestle for every company in the world in the TD Garden, because that's what I want to be known for and remembered in my life, is for being the man who did it all everywhere.
I've heard you in interviews before talk about how you associate yourself when you're with a wrestling company like you're on a team,
yes,
where you're going to go to bat for that team. So absolutely. Being a team guy, given how it ended and how surprising it was, did it make it heartbreaking for you?
Yes. And like any team idea, I'm not upset at my teammates. It's the ownership, right? Like that's where the issue lies. The coaches, if you will. My teammates, I will always have love for them. I was talking last night in the AEW backstage area with so many people that I haven't seen for such a long time, and I was telling anecdotes about how difficult it is knowing that last time that me and Ricochet were in the locker room together, and I said, it was funny, we had a conversation. I said, I thanked him for everything. I said goodbye to him, and I said, hey man, I'll see you either in 2 weeks or 5 years. You know, I don't know which one it's going to be. And we laughed about it because at the time we genuinely didn't know. That's just how professional wrestling works. Sometimes you say goodbye to your friends and you don't see them for 5 years, just because that's the nature of the business, right? I'm never going to be in that locker room. I'm never going to. And I said goodbye to everyone else because I thought I'd be back the next weekend. And it turns out I was saying, see you fellas. And now I'm not going to see a lot of those guys for a really long time. Maybe some of them I might not ever see ever again if the cards don't fall the right way. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. But the good news is that I got an avalanche last night of so many people that I haven't seen in such a long time that is the other side of the double-edged sword that makes it so wonderful. I got to see Mark, I got to see Swerve, I got to see Tommy End, I got to see so many guys. Even one of the highlights of the night for me was that a ton of the production staff at AEW, and you wouldn't know this because they're not on television, you don't see them. Like I watch AEW, I got to see Tony Storm, I got to see so many, but backstage, a lot of the production staff is old school Ring of Honor guys that I haven't seen in 7 years. So yeah, it was really exciting to see a lot of those people in person, and it was a very, very, very comforting experience in a time where there's some negativity in my life, because I have to kind of come to terms with the fact that there's a whole group of people that 3 weeks ago I was on their team and we had one goal, and now all of a sudden I got cut from the team. But that's such is life,
Absolutely. And one of the teams you did play for and you were a big star on was the NXT Black and Gold era. I think a lot of people have an affinity for you during the Black and Gold era, which Triple H was very hands-on at that time. So given the fact that this happened during the Triple H era, so to speak, when it maybe seems like he would have been your biggest proponent, do you at all feel betrayed by Triple H?
I don't know that I'd say betrayed is the word that I would use. And a lot of this has to be taken with a grain of salt, because the bottom line is I don't know, right? I never got an explanation, which, for the record, that's not cool. I wanted an explanation, and I asked lots of people for an explanation. I did not get one. Again, it's a business. They don't owe me anything. They're not legally obligated to tell me anything. That being said, I felt like my tenure in WWE and my performance in WWE, at a bare minimum, I think that warranted some sort of explanation as to what was happening. And I never got one. And that's disappointing. The word I would use the most to describe how I feel about WWE and the components of WWE and how this transpired would be disappointed, right? Not disgusted, not angry, not none of that, because at the end of the day, Endeavor is a business, and they're a very successful business, and they own WWE, and that's an extremely successful business. So I'm not going to sit back and pretend that I understand business decisions better than them. I don't. I understand wrestling decisions, but I'm also not going to pretend that I understand wrestling decisions better than Triple H, right? Like, who am I to say that Triple H is wrong about something? That being said, I'm going to prove him wrong about this one. I don't know if it was his decision, right? I don't. I genuinely don't, because I never got an explanation. That being said, somebody had to be involved in the decision-making process, right? If it wasn't him, fine. If Endeavor said, nope, you got to get rid of 5 guys, list 5. I don't know the situation. I don't know. So I can't in all good conscience sit back and point the finger at any one person, because I was given no explanation. And maybe that's why I wasn't given an explanation. So I can't pinpoint what went wrong and who made what call and whatever it happens to be. That being said, whatever the process was, whatever the decision-making process was, it's disappointing for sure. And I need to prove, whoever was involved in that process, I need to make sure that I prove them wrong.
And that attitude, to me, is the secret ingredient to success in pro wrestling when you're at this type of crossroads. I saw the same attitude with Drew McIntyre, where he was at the very bottom and he was released as part of a joke faction, really, and he came back as a top star because he wanted.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, same thing as Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
And to your point, you talk about, okay, let's talk about Retribution for a little bit, because I was rooting for this faction when they were going on. You were talking about in your letter how you would pitch and you would pitch, and there's a lot of talk about ideas and wrestling ideas. I want to know, what was an idea you heard about Retribution when that was going on that didn't make it to TV, that it's like, okay, that's not even good enough to be on TV for Retribution? Was there anything like that?
Yes. Yeah. The most memorable one was what I'll just say it. This is a Vince idea. Vince wanted Mia Yim to pretend that she was having a seizure. Yeah, he wanted her to pretend she was having an epileptic seizure, and we were presented this by, I don't know, the writer or the producer, and we didn't want to shoot the messenger, right? Like, you could see, and I don't remember who it was, but you could see in their face that they're like, I'm sorry, but Vince wants you to have a seizure. And she's like, we're all like, what are you talking about? Like, we can't do this. I was talking about this with Pat Buck last night, because he was a producer at that, and maybe he was our producer, I don't remember, but he was in the room when Vince came back and he pitched this seizure thing, and everyone was like, but like, that's the way that the production meetings worked back then under Vince, is everyone would he'd say something and everyone would just have wide eyes, because like, you can't call him on it. You can't be like, no, Vince, that's fucking stupid, because he'll just fire you. You'll not have a job anymore in the middle of a pandemic. So everyone's just like, okay. And you have to like take this like weird like approach of like, have you considered something? No, I wanted to have a seizure. And then it's like, you get, and so they brought that to her, and we're like, so now we have to go into, and this happened routinely, right? This was probably the worst thing, just because it's so offensive. But things like that would happen routinely, where they would bring us nonsense, and we'd be like, Ali would be like, all right, because he's the leader of the group, right, in kayfabe, but he was also our leader in real life, right? He had the most tenure on Raw. He had the best relationship with Vince, so it would always be this like, all right, guys, I'm gonna go talk to Vince. I'm gonna try to do that. Every week he would go into Vince's office and be like, hey, boss, like, can we change this? Can we adjust it? And Vince would, no, and there'd be this discourse back and forth. And Ali would come back with like, hey, I got this changed. I got this changed. We still have to do this. We still look like complete assholes doing this, but like, we don't have to do this quite as much. And we'd be like, all right. But we took what was always abysmal, horrible, unpresentable to just bad. And that was our claim to fame every week, is all right, good. We finished TV, and we all still have our jobs and our dignity to some extent. And that was the bar of Retribution, was just not getting thrown off television. Because if you fake a seizure on television, like, that's going to offend countless people. So what we ended up doing to try to appease and trick Vince was, we pretended that she pretended that she was covered in spiders or something, so she started like itching herself. There's a segment that you can go watch. It's probably on YouTube right now.
I remember it.
Whatever her name was, Reckoning or something. Reckoning has itching skin or something. Whatever thing happened, and these were the kind of things that we were doing every week, and it would generate millions of views on YouTube for all the wrong reasons, because people are clicking like, what is this dog shit? Like, what is this nonsense? These guys look ridiculous. They're doing the most ridiculous stuff. And there was no real explanation for any of it, other than I think that it was just like walking, talking clickbait at that point. Just like, let's see how foolish we can make these people look without like completely compromising our program. And I guess that's what they landed on.
Now, did Vince act out this seizure for you guys? Because he's known to...
No, he was. I never very rarely in Vince. There's. I was talking about this with Scotty Too Hottie last night, actually, because I was asking him. I was like, "Did you ever do stuff on the main roster with Vince?" He said, "With like this version of Vince, like an older Vince, like in recent years." He said 2 times when they were doing Raw at the Performance Center, they had the coaches step in to help. And it was just such a nightmare. This guy was like, I don't ever want to do this ever again. You heard similar stories about it all the time. But this is Scotty Too Hottie, so he knows Vince McMahon. He dealt with him from 1992 or whenever Scott Taylor started in the WWF all the way to 2003 or 4, whenever Too Cool disbanded, or because he had a good stretch. So this was a guy who was dealing with that late 90s, early 2000s Vince all the time. And I asked him, I'm like, was there a dramatic difference between those two Vinces? And he was like, yes, a huge difference. Because like back when he was in like promoter mode, he was kind of with the boys. You know, he's one of the boys. He's always been this crazy eccentric character who's acting things out and blah blah blah. But towards the end of it, it just became this like, and I don't want to assume it's like a dementia thing, but that's kind of the parallel that everybody drew, was like, he's 74 years old and there's like some sort of legitimate issue with whatever's going on in his head, because he forgets stuff, but he remembers lots of specific things, but it's clear that he's like losing his mind in some capacity. And obviously we saw tons of evidence of that. So that's kind of where we land today.
And so with WWE, you were there long enough to see them during like some of these dark periods, like the pandemic, 2019 or whatnot, 2020. And then also long enough to see them during I consider to be the best period in WWE right now. What was more frustrating or disappointing for you? Was it not getting the opportunities you felt you deserved when they were struggling, when you knew you could contribute a spark, or not getting those opportunities when they were winning, which is like being on a playoff team and being like, hey, I can win you guys a Super Bowl?
Which one is more frustrating? Man, that's a great question. I would say that the most frustrating period in my career was definitely 2022. Certainly the beginning and middle of it. The end, it ended well for me because I was able to transition down to NXT. But the end of 2021 and the beginning and middle of 2022, where the draft happened and I was split up from my best friend Brennan Williams, who was Mace, and he's now Mason D. Madden on the Indies with Mansoor, because all of us were together during the pandemic. So even though we were in Retribution, even though it was a catastrophe, even though it was horrible, we would still go every week to the Thunderdome, and there were all of my best friends. Mm-hmm. Shane Thorne, another one of my best friends, and who was Slapjacks. We were all in the trenches together, right? There's just bullets flying over our head, but it's your best friends are all next to you. So that was okay, right? Because as a person and a human being, I get to deal with nonsense and bullshit with my friends, and then I get to come home and spend the rest of the week with my family. I was okay with that, right? I could live with it. It was all fine. Then we get put in the tag team. All right, I'm in a tag team with one of my best friends. We're working together. It's still kind of nonsense. I'm still kind of T-Bar. He's still Maze. It's still not perfect. We're still pitching stuff. But again, I'm with one of my best friends. Okay. The draft happens. We get split up. I have a few matches on Raw, and then I'm off Raw inexplicably for no reason for months and months and months. Because they gave me a chance against Priest and Finn, and they gave me some matches on Raw, and by all accord, I did very well in those matches. Everyone was happy with the matches. Vince had a problem with the Priest match, but the fans loved the Priest match, and then I seemingly made up for it with the Finn match. And then all I heard from writers and from people in production meetings was Vince was asking about you. Oh, Vince wants something. He wants something for T-Bar. He wants to. So that's what I heard. But then here comes back into the old Vince thing. Old is an insult, but like that was the mentality. This guy's aged out of professional wrestling, or I guess the mind that you need to have a sustainable creative mind. But I guess that just fell off the table because I never heard about it again. And then I was off Raw. I had 2 matches on Raw. One was getting squashed by Omos in February or something. And then there was a battle royal in maybe like April or May or something. So for January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, 8 months I was on Raw twice, but I was on main event like every week, almost every week. And if I wasn't on main event, I was probably staying at home. So those were that, and I was T-bar, but I just looked like this, right? I just stopped. I grew my hair out. I had everything. I had a beard. I stopped wearing the face paint because I was like, nobody cares. So I'm just going to stop wearing all this stuff. And so it was just me, but my name was T-bar, and I was on main event. And that whole time, I was just pitching, because you alluded to pitching stuff earlier, just endlessly pitching to Vince, endlessly to my writer, to Bruce, to everyone. Anyone who would listen, I'd send an email, I'd send it this, I'd send it that. And I was doing it in a fashion where I was doing everything in my power to not be annoying, right? I didn't want to be the guy who sent fucking 10 things every day, because then it all just gets lost in the wash. So I'd pick and choose my battles. I'd say, here's what's needed on TV. Here's what I can do for you. 1 thing a month. I'll try this guy. No response. Okay. 3 weeks later, I'll try Vince. No response. All right. I'll try 3 weeks later, Johnny Ace. I just to make sure that they know that I care. I care. I exist. I'm trying. Here's ideas. Here's a bunch of different ideas. And they didn't want to hear any of it. They just, and it was such a difficult, dark period in my professional life, because at that point you're doing everything in your power. I know how good I am, right? I know what I'm capable of, and I've done it before and I've done it since. This is just T-bar on main event. So like, what can you possibly do? Not just T-bar on main event, but T-bar on main event with Vince McMahon watching and ridiculing your every step and his idea of wrestling. And so it's like, it's just this impossible task. It's this impossible hill to climb. And I know I'm low on the pecking order at this point, right? Because it's like I can barely get on Raw. I can barely do all these things. And while this is happening, all of a sudden, like, releases start happening. So now not only am I in this shitty position, but all my friends are getting fired. And it's like, this is the only positive moments that I have in my professional life, because my family is healthy and happy, and I'm very happy with my wife and my kids and everything about that, and I get to spend a ton of time with them. So my personal life is going very well. My professional life is a catastrophe, because I'm in the prime of my career. I'm 34 or 35 years old. I know I have so much to offer professional wrestling, but I'm in a horrible position. I feel like I'm going to get fired every time my phone rings. And I'm waiting for anything to happen, whether it's an opportunity, because if I get fired, I'm in a bad spot, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, my contract wasn't renewed. I'm in a tremendous spot. And I was talking to Johnny Russo, who's one of the head writers. He's the head writer for NXT, because he reached out to me today to, I don't remember if he apologized. He shouldn't apologize. It's not his fault. He did very well by me. But just to say that, he's thinking about me, whatever. And I thanked him, because I'm in a great spot right now because of my run on NXT. And I have no qualms about saying that. That's very 100% accurate. If I had been released back then, I would have been in trouble. I would have been in big trouble, because it's not a good spot to be in. Shane Thorne got absolutely screwed by this company. Just 100%. He's Shane Hayes now, and he has since recovered because he's so talented and incredible. He's now a IWGP tag champ for New Japan, because he dug his way out of a fucking rut that they put him in, because he was slapjack, which was awful. And then they banished him off to SmackDown, not on TV, and then they fired his ass. That's You don't just bust, and then he had a 90-day no compete clause.
Yeah.
So he didn't bust out of the gates onto the indies like I did and take off a mask, everybody cheers, show up at AEW, show up at this, the internet's buzzing, millions of retweets. That wasn't him limping out of a wheelchair with a broken leg, not literally, figuratively, trying to somebody please book me. They'd be like, who are you? You were Slapjack on Raw? Like, it's like, why would anyone spend money? And this is one of the best professional wrestlers in the world. He's literally one of the most prestigious tag team champions in the world right now because he dug himself out of that hole, but it took him 2 years to do it. That's not okay. That's not an okay thing to do to someone. But that's what happened. And thankfully that didn't happen to me, but that was the most difficult time of my professional life. Thankfully, I was in the ring pretty often. So at least those 10-minute segments I could because when I'm in the ring, that's when I'm happy. Professionally, that's when I'm happy. Everything else can be hit or miss, or you're with your friends, you call in matches, whatever it happens to be. But when I'm in the ring and when the bell rings, I'm happy. No matter what. I could be the biggest, silliest goof on the planet, but as long as the bell rings, I'm happy in the ring. So those 10-minute windows on Main Event were what were keeping my sanity for a long time.
So this new way WWE is doing business under their new regime, you were talking about compared to Shane Thorne in terms of getting the 90-day compete versus letting the contract expire. Do you consider the way you were released somewhat of a blessing in disguise because you could just show up at a Blitzkrieg a day later?
I don't think it's a secret at this point that nobody's a fan of the WWE contract.
Right.
That isn't a real contract where they can just release you at any point for any reason. I think that's silly nonsense. I don't know why that's allowed to be legal. It just feels illegal to me, and I feel like nobody's taken the time and monetary effort to challenge the legality of it, because we're so clearly not independent contractors. Like, that's the most made up nonsense in the history of the world. So and people have talked about this ad nauseum. Something needs to be done about it because it's just silly. It's silliness. That being said, if you're going to allow people's contracts to run out, I think there needs to be more communication. Obviously, fantastic example of that. That being said, one of the strangest parts of this is that they started informing people like, hey, we're not going to be renewing your contract. And it was usually about a month out, if not a little bit more, right? I've heard stories of, I think they allowed Lacey Evans' contract to run out. I think they allowed Scripps' contract to run out. But they informed these people with a pretty decent amount of time. For whatever reason, mine was a lot later. And I don't know if that was because they were trying to bleed every last speck of wrestling out of me, because I was on WWE Speed like a week ago. like 10 days ago, I was on WWE Speed. And it was the posted tweet on WWE like last week. So I don't know if the plan was to just get every last drop out of the sponge and then break it off clean, or what the thought process was. I don't agree with that particular business practice. Is it illegal? No. Is it ethical, in my opinion? I don't think it's great. I was left scrambling. I don't think that it's the most ethical way to do this, because I've been left kind of scrambling. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I should have planned for the worst better. That being said, that's easier said than done, because like you can't confirm bookings and stuff while you still think that you're going to work for WWE. That's just not how it works. I can't say, yes, I'm going to be on your show in July. Yes, I'm going to be on your show in July, and then re-sign with WWE. That screws everybody over.
Right.
So as soon as I could, I started scrambling, trying to book these dates, but that's not easy. A couple weeks out, 2 or 3 weeks out from a show in July. So my dates are kind of thin right now, and I'm not getting paid by WWE. That's not great. That's not a great business practice. Or maybe because business, like, what do they care about about my, that doesn't concern them.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the ethicalness of it, I think that there's a better way to do it that doesn't desecrate their bottom line, and I think would be just fine to do. I don't think we needed me on a main event match or a speed match. I don't think that made the company and made them tons of money. I think that was just, I happened to be there. So this could have been a lot better of a process, and it just wasn't, for whatever reason. Maybe I don't believe this, but maybe what was relayed to me through the grapevine, which is that this was a decision that came down to the wire, and it just went one way or the other instead of the other. Maybe that's actually factually accurate. I don't believe it is. I think that this decision was made a long time ago.
I'm glad to hear you address independent contractor situation, because we all know that's bullshit. We've seen FedEx do the same exact thing to their workers and lose in court. So it might be illegal for all we know. But in the wrestling business, what do you think a union would look like? Because ironically, they're run by TKO Endeavor, and they work with SAG-AFTRA, so like the actors union could be an option. What would you think would be some options in terms of a wrestling union?
I don't have the slightest idea. I really don't. I know that it will be difficult without the support of the top guys in the company. And the top guys in the company are so well taken care of that that's going to be difficult. I think that's by design. I think that that's very intentional on the part of WWE and Endeavor and whoever's making those decisions. I think they know that. I think that, and quite frankly, for everybody else, wrestling is such a silly product that it might be fine with just those guys. It really might be. If everybody goes on strike or whatever, like, it's probably still fine because it's just silly made up nonsense. So it's hard to say that, like, we can all get together and make change, or because we might not be able to. They might just, I don't know. Also keep in mind that this isn't legitimate sport. This isn't a professional sport, right? At the end of the day, if I'm a baseball player or a basketball player or a UFC fighter or whatever, UFC to a lesser extent, because there is a bit of showmanship to that. So some of those guys get screwed on some of that stuff. But basketball, football, everything that's on the level, for sure. If you want to strike and protest and all those things and be effective about it, at the end of the day, when terms are agreed to and everything happens, you're still going to be you, right? LeBron James isn't going to get worse at basketball because he was on strike or whatever. Peyton Manning isn't going to become a worse football player throwing and catching a football. Again, I alluded to UFC a little bit to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, it's a fist fight and you choke out a guy because you're the best fighter. That's the end of the story. Professional wrestling, it is extremely, extremely easy to punish someone without explanation, right? So if I do something that my employer views as negative, there is nothing stopping them from being like, oh, that's great, we love him, he's our favorite employee. By the way, I'm booking the fake show and he gets killed in 5 seconds and we dump dog food all over him. Oh no, that's not punishment. That's the fun show that we do, and you're the bad guy, so we're gonna do it. That's there's no, you can justify literally anything because it's fake made up nonsense. So so that's a very real thing, right? If somebody starts to make a fuss or make a noise, and this happened to me, by the way, when contract stuff came up, And all of a sudden, boom, you look super silly, and boom, you're getting choked out, and boom, you get and this is I've heard this story so many times where you get, because that's just the nature of the beast. They can do whatever they want to you and make you look however they want you to look. And the explanation is it's pro wrestling. And that's all that it needs to be. There doesn't need to be a justification. I can't go hit a game-winning 3-point shot. I can't go win the big match because I'm just doing what I'm being told to do in the and that ends up affecting me as a product. And that's the unfortunate reality of this business.
Yeah, you were also talking about, planning and what you could have done to plan and whatnot, and how you were caught off guard. In terms of, because you said that your personal life is very stable and well taken care of, were you also able to save enough money to where this is a situation that you could weather the storm easier?
No, I mean, we have money saved,
Sure.
But here's the thing about professional wrestling is, and this is what I always tell people, I can't do this forever. Not only can I not do it forever, I can't do it for much longer, right? So I'm 37. I started wrestling when I was 25. That's give or take, that's about what a lot of people start around. And so at this point in my career, right? And professional wrestling isn't an easy business to get, unless you're a lucky person and usually like the son of someone famous or whatever thing happened to get you right into WWE right away. Most of us have to start at just some random school, losing tons of money for a ton of time until we're 30 years old. Then we finally get a job in Ring of Honor. Now we're barely making ends meet with that money. You get over enough to the point where it's like, wow, I'm a big star on the indies. I'm actually making a profit off of professional wrestling the first time. You get signed to WWE. They give you this low ball contract that's okay, but you can live off of it. Great. And then finally you start making money, and everybody sees these big contracts and they go, oh, he's so rich. He's so well taken care of. You're not rich in professional wrestling because you have to make enough money to last the rest of your life, because you can't do this, right? So my goal wasn't to make the minimum main roster contract, which on paper sounds good. It sounds good on paper because when you think about on paper, you're thinking about, oh, that's my salary forever. I have that until I retire. That's not what we have. We have a very short window to make as much money as we possibly can because we need to live off of this forever. I'm 37. If I'm lucky, I will still be doing this at 45. That's less than 8 years away. If I'm still doing it at 45, my body at the way that I wrestle and the style that I wrestle, there's no way that I can maintain the way that I wrestle and the style that I wrestle past 45. So by that point, I'm either over, super over, or I'm done. Like Sting, Edge, Hogan, John Cena levels of over, or else you're in a bad spot. If you need to rely on your body past 45, you're in a rough spot. You don't want to be in that spot. That's difficult. And a lot of guys do that. And they have to rely on their broken down bodies to make money. And that's why you see them limping around and bumping and a lot of these guys get addicted to pills, and then that's how this whole thing spirals. But if you can become a top guy and make enough money in a short amount of time, then you can retire at 45 and say, I got enough money, I'm done, and I can live off of this amount of money for the rest of my life. Great. That's the goal. Or you're so over that you get to keep doing this, but you don't do it very often, and you do it at a very minimal rate, and you don't have to do flips off the top. You can just grab something and say your catchphrase, and everybody cheers and buys your t-shirt, and that's the goal, right? But if you don't get one of those two situations, you're in trouble, right? You're in trouble. So that's why I look at these contracts and I say they should be bigger. And it's not because I'm some gluttonous greed. It's because these windows close quickly, as I just found out. So it's not. So no, I don't have a ton of money saved. We're not rich. I was on a good contract for 3 years, but that wasn't enough money to pay off my house. That wasn't enough money to pay off all my cars and all my stuff and the put my kids through college and all this stuff. So yes, we have a little bit of money saved, but no, it's not enough to live off of for the rest of my life. I have to keep working, and I have to get back to a spot where I can make enough money, because eventually we're going to hit that 45-year-old window, and it's going to need to go one way or the other. And that's once I get there, then you have to make a decision. If you don't have those funds saved, you have to make a decision. Am I going to bust and break my body past the point of no return because this is my only, for lack of a better term, export? This is the only, I've done this my whole life now. I started pro wrestling when I was 25, and it became my full-time job at 28. I can't just whatever other thing, there's no other job option. This is all I know. It's for me, my backup plan is like open a pro wrestling school, because it needs to be something in pro wrestling that I do, because that's my field of expertise is pro wrestling, right? Could I learn another? I happen to have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in criminal justice, but that's a very entry level. Yeah. I'm not trying to rely on that money once I hit 50 and I can't wrestle anymore. That's not a good spot to be in. So the goal is as much money as we possibly can make in a short amount of time. And I think these contracts could be much better, especially since WWE is making money hand over fist, and they're making more money than they ever have in their history. But then they're nickel and diming the talent. So that's, I'm sure that's the correct business decision, but there needs to be some pushback in some capacity, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And we'll leave you on one more question, because you did bring up in terms of you seeing the end, and then you brought up some of those legends like Sting and Cena. What is the ideal scenario? And you did touch on it, but maybe anything specific, a last match or just a last career run that you've envisioned for yourself in terms of this is how you would like to go out.
I would love to go out, and my children are my son is 6 and he turns 7 soon, and my daughter is 3 and she turns 4 next month. I would love this month, actually. I would love to do this long enough if they're interested. I'm not the kind of person who's going to force my children to do anything and be like, you need to follow in my footsteps, whatever thing. But I would love for them to become interested in professional wrestling, and I would love my last match to be against one of my 2 children. I think that would be incredible for me. I think that would mean the world to me. And if they don't get into professional wrestling, they don't get into professional wrestling. I'm not going to force it. But that's just kind of my fantasy, I guess.
That's awesome. Hey, we just saw Bronny James get drafted to the Lakers. He's playing with his dad.
Exactly.
So that's exactly the scenario that can play out.
Yeah, same
I
kind
love
of
that.
idea.